Emily had always been someone who cared deeply about making others feel valued and included. Whether it was organizing birthday celebrations for her friends or planning thoughtful surprises for her family, she took pride in creating moments that brought people together. So when she got engaged to Alex, the love of her life, Emily knew she wanted to do something special, not just for him, but also for his family. She believed that blending their two worlds would lay the foundation for a happy and harmonious future. From the very beginning, Emily noticed that Alex's mother, Linda, was a bit difficult to read. On the surface, Linda seemed warm and welcoming, often complimenting Emily on her appearance or asking questions about her work. But there were subtle signs that hinted at deeper tensions beneath the surface. Sometimes, Linda would make offhand remarks like, "Oh, I suppose modern girls don't have time for traditional values anymore." Or, "Well, I raised Alex to appreciate home-cooked meals." At first, Emily brushed these comments aside, assuming they were harmless quirks. After all, every family has its share of eccentricities, right? But as the wedding plans progressed, those little jabs started to pile up. Once, during a casual dinner at Alex's house, Linda criticized Emily's choice of career, saying, "It must be nice to travel so much for work, though I worry you won't have enough time to focus on being a wife." Another time, she commented on Emily's outfit, implying it wasn't suitable for someone about to join their family. Each remark stung a little more than the last, but Emily tried hard not to let it show. Deep down, she hoped that if she proved herself to be kind, thoughtful, and genuine, Linda might come around. That's when the idea struck her, a surprise party for Linda. It felt like the perfect solution. A celebration in her honor would surely soften Linda's attitude and give them both a chance to connect on a personal level. Plus, it would demonstrate how much effort Emily was putting into becoming part of the family. She imagined the look of joy on Linda's face, the hugs they'd exchange, and the newfound bond they'd share. The thought filled Emily with excitement, and she threw herself wholeheartedly into planning the event. She spent weeks researching venues, choosing decorations, and curating a guest list that included Linda's closest friends and relatives. Emily even went out of her way to learn about Linda's favorite foods, flowers, and music preferences, determined to make the evening unforgettable. Friends teased her about going overboard, but Emily didn't mind. To her, this wasn't just a party, it was an investment in her future happiness. If she could win Linda over, maybe the rest of their lives together would be smoother sailing. Despite her enthusiasm, Emily couldn't shake the nagging feeling that things weren't quite as simple as she hoped. There were moments when she wondered if Linda would truly appreciate her efforts or if she'd find fault no matter what Emily did. Still, she pushed those doubts aside, clinging to the belief that kindness could overcome anything. Little did she know, her well-intentioned gesture was about to take a turn she never saw coming, one that would test her patience, resilience, and faith in the power of forgiveness. While Emily was busy pouring her heart into planning the surprise party, things at home weren't as smooth as she hoped they'd be. Linda's behavior continued to leave Emily feeling uneasy, though she tried her best to ignore it. Every interaction with her future mother-in-law felt like walking on eggshells. It wasn't always obvious. Linda never raised her voice or said anything outright cruel, but her words carried a sting that lingered long after the conversation ended. Take, for example, the time Emily invited Linda over for coffee. She had spent hours preparing homemade cookies and setting up the living room to make everything perfect. When Linda arrived, she glanced around the space and said, "Oh, this is nice. I suppose you are still learning how to decorate properly." Her tone was light, almost casual, but the comment hit Emily hard. She forced a smile and changed the subject, not wanting to let Linda see how much those words affected her. Later that night, alone in her room, Emily replayed the moment in her head, wondering if she'd ever meet Linda's standards. The tension between them grew stronger as the wedding date approached. One evening, while discussing seating arrangements for the reception, Linda made a remark about Emily's parents. "They seem lovely," she said with a tight smile, but I do hope they understand our family traditions. Weddings are such important events. They shouldn't feel too unconventional." Emily bit her lip, unsure of how to respond. She loved her parents dearly and didn't want anyone questioning their role in her life. Still, she nodded politely, hoping to avoid an argument. Alex noticed the strain between his fiancée and his mother, and he often found himself caught in the middle. He loved them both deeply and wanted nothing more than for them to get along. But no matter how many times he encouraged Emily to give Mom a chance or reassured her that Linda didn't mean any harm, the situation remained tense. Once, during a quiet moment together, Alex admitted, "My mom can be tough sometimes. She just has high expectations, especially when it comes to family. Try not to take it personally." Emily appreciated his support, but deep down, she couldn't help feeling frustrated. Why did Linda have to make everything so complicated? Wasn't it enough that Emily was trying her hardest to fit into their family? The constant criticism weighed on her, making her question whether she'd ever truly belong. Yet, despite her doubts, Emily refused to give up. She clung to the belief that people could change, that kindness and effort could bridge even the widest gaps. As she worked tirelessly on the party plans, Emily allowed herself to dream of a breakthrough. Maybe this event would finally show Linda that she wasn't the person she assumed her to be. Perhaps it would prove that Emily genuinely cared about their family and was willing to go the extra mile to make things work. These thoughts kept her going, even when the stress threatened to overwhelm her. But beneath her optimism, a small voice of uncertainty whispered warnings she couldn't quite silence. What if Linda didn't appreciate the gesture? What if, instead of bringing them closer, the party only highlighted the growing divide between them? The thought scared Emily, but she pushed it aside, reminding herself that love required sacrifice. If throwing this party meant earning Linda's approval, or at least her respect, it would be worth it. Little did Emily know, the path ahead held challenges far greater than she could have imagined. The day of the party finally arrived, and Emily woke up with a mix of excitement and nerves. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and now it was time to see if all her hard work would pay off. The morning passed in a blur as she put the finishing touches on everything, checking the decorations, confirming the catering setup, and making sure every guest knew their role in keeping the surprise intact. By the time evening rolled around, the venue looked picture-perfect, glowing with soft lights and filled with the sweet scent of fresh flowers. As guests began arriving, Emily greeted each one with a warm smile, doing her best to appear calm and composed. Inside, however, her heart was racing. She kept glancing at the entrance, waiting for Linda to walk through the door. When Linda finally arrived, escorted by Alex, who pretended they were just going out for dinner, her expression shifted from confusion to surprise. For a brief moment, Emily felt a wave of relief. This was exactly the reaction she'd hoped for, a look of genuine happiness that said, "You did this for me." Linda hugged Emily awkwardly, murmuring a polite thank you, before stepping inside to take in the scene. The room erupted into applause as everyone cheered, welcoming her to the celebration. Linda smiled faintly, though something about her demeanor seemed guarded. Emily brushed it off, assuming it was simply disbelief at being surprised so thoroughly. After all, how could anyone not be touched by such an elaborate gesture? Dinner went smoothly at first. Guests mingled, sharing stories and laughter while enjoying the carefully chosen menu. Emily watched Linda closely, searching for signs of approval or enjoyment. At times, Linda appeared relaxed, chatting with old friends and sampling the food. But there were also moments when her smile faltered, replaced by an unreadable expression that made Emily uneasy. Still, she clung to hope, telling herself that things were going well. When it came time for speeches, Emily stood up nervously, clutching her glass of wine for support. She cleared her throat and began speaking, her voice steadied despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Linda," she started, looking directly at her future mother-in-law, "I wanted tonight to be a way of showing how much I admire and appreciate you. You've raised an incredible son, and I'm so grateful to become part of your family. Thank you for letting me join your world. I promise to always do my best to make you proud." Her words hung in the air, heartfelt and sincere. For a second, the room was silent, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then, slowly, people began to clap, nodding in agreement with Emily's kind sentiments. Linda sat quietly, her lips pressed together in a tight line. Emily expected her to stand up next, perhaps to return the compliment or express gratitude. Instead, Linda remained seated, her face unreadable. And then, without warning, the atmosphere shifted. As Emily sat back down, still basking in the warmth of the applause, Linda suddenly rose to her feet. Her movements were deliberate, commanding attention. Emily froze, sensing that something wasn't right. The room fell silent again, anticipation crackling in the air. Linda glanced around at the guests, her gaze landing briefly on Emily before she began to speak. What came next shattered the fragile peace of the evening and left Emily reeling. Linda's voice cut through the silence like a sharp blade, slicing into the warmth of the moment. With a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes, she began speaking in a tone that was deceptively sweet, but laced with venom. "Oh, Emily," she said, her words dripping with sarcasm. "What a lovely speech. So heartfelt, so rehearsed." The room seemed to shrink as everyone turned their attention to her, unsure of where this was heading. Emily's heart sank as Linda continued, her tone growing sharper with each sentence. "You really think throwing me a party makes up for everything else? For all the ways you clearly don't fit into our family?" She paused dramatically, letting her words hang in the air before diving deeper. "I mean, let's be honest. Your career keeps you away from home more than it should. And your cooking." Linda chuckled lightly, though there was no humor in it. "Well, I doubt Alex will ever get used to take-out dinners every night." The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some exchanging nervous glances, while others stared at their plates, unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. Emily felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, her mind racing to process what was happening. This wasn't just criticism. It was a public attack, delivered with calculated precision to humiliate her in front of everyone she cared about. Linda wasn't done yet. She went on to list other perceived flaws, her voice rising slightly as if she were performing for an audience. "And let's not forget your fashion sense. I suppose it's trendy, but does it really scream respectable?" Her gaze swept over Emily, lingering on her outfit as if to emphasize the point. "Honestly, I don't know how someone like you expects to uphold the values of a family like ours." Every word felt like a punch to the gut, leaving Emily paralyzed with shock. She wanted to defend herself, to tell Linda that none of this was fair or true, but the words stuck in her throat. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision as she struggled to maintain composure. The room, once filled with laughter and joy, now felt suffocating, the weight of Linda's words pressing down on everyone present. Alex was the first to react, his face flushed with anger as he stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Mom, stop it," he snapped, his voice loud enough to echo through the quiet space. "This is supposed to be a celebration, not an interrogation. How can you do this to her?" But Linda didn't back down. Instead, she squared her shoulders, meeting her son's glare with unwavering resolve. "I'm just being honest, Alex," she replied coolly. "Someone has to say these things. If Emily can't handle a little truth, maybe she isn't ready to be part of this family." The tension in the room was unbearable. Friends and relatives exchanged awkward looks, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. A few tried to lighten the mood with weak jokes or attempts to change the subject, but nothing could erase the damage that had already been done. Emily, overwhelmed by shame and hurt, felt the walls closing in around her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She just knew she needed to get out of there. Without another word, she pushed her chair back and bolted toward the exit, tears streaming down her face. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the stunned silence, followed by murmurs of disbelief from the crowd. Outside, the cool night air hit her like a wave, offering little relief from the storm raging inside her. As she leaned against the wall, trying to steady herself, one thought kept replaying in her mind. How could this happen? On the morning of her wedding, Emily woke up with a mix of emotions swirling inside her. There was excitement, of course, the kind that comes with starting a new chapter of life, but also a lingering sense of caution. She couldn't help but think about the journey that had brought her here, the months of planning, the tension with Linda, and the painful night of the party that still haunted her memories. Yet, as she stood in front of the mirror in her wedding dress, surrounded by her closest friends and family, she felt something else too, a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed. Sarah adjusted the veil on Emily's head, tears glistening in her eyes. "You look stunning," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And you're going to be amazing today." Emily smiled softly, grateful for her friend's unwavering support. Alex's younger sister, who had been skeptical of Emily at first, handed her a bouquet of white roses, Linda's favorite flower, and gave her an encouraging nod. "For luck," she whispered. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to Emily. When the ceremony began, Emily walked down the aisle with her father by her side, her heart pounding with anticipation. At the end of the aisle stood Alex, his face lighting up with pride and love as he watched her approach. For a moment, everything else faded away. The doubts, the fears, the lingering scars from past conflicts. All that mattered was the man standing before her, ready to spend the rest of his life by her side. The vows they exchanged were simple yet profound, filled with promises to stand together through both joy and hardship. As Emily looked into Alex's eyes, she realized how far they had come, not just as individuals, but as a team. They had weathered challenges, faced uncomfortable truths, and learned to navigate the complexities of blending two families. And while their path hadn't been easy, it had made them stronger. After the ceremony, during the reception, Emily scanned the room, taking in the faces of those who had gathered to celebrate their union. Her gaze landed on Linda, who sat quietly at a table near the back. To Emily's surprise, Linda offered a small, tentative smile when their eyes met. It wasn't perfect. There was still distance between them, but it was progress. Earlier that day, Linda had pulled Emily aside to thank her for including her in the wedding preparations. "I know we've had our differences," she'd said softly, "but I want you to know I'm happy for you and Alex." Though her words weren't effusive or overly warm, they carried weight. Emily nodded, accepting the olive branch for what it was. She didn't expect miracles overnight, but she recognized that Linda's effort, however small, was significant. It was a step toward healing, a sign that maybe, just maybe, they could find common ground over time. As the evening unfolded, Emily danced with Alex under twinkling lights, laughter filling the air around them. Friends toasted to their future, sharing funny stories and heartfelt wishes. Even Linda joined in briefly, clinking her glass during a speech and offering a polite laugh at one of Alex's jokes. It wasn't the picture-perfect bond Emily had once dreamed of, but it was real, and sometimes real was better than perfect. Later that night, as Emily lay in bed beside Alex, reflecting on the whirlwind of the day, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life, she realized, wasn't about avoiding challenges or pretending everything was flawless. It was about growing through adversity, learning to forgive, and finding beauty in imperfection. She knew there would still be tough days ahead, moments when old wounds might resurface or tensions flare, but she also knew she had the tools to handle them. With Alex by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. As sleep finally claimed her, Emily smiled to herself, thinking about the road they had traveled and the one that lay ahead. Love wasn't always smooth sailing, but it was worth every storm. And for the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace. Emily knew that pulling off the perfect party for Linda wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to make it happen. She enlisted the help of her closest friends and family members, turning the planning process into a team effort. Her best friend Sarah became her right-hand woman, helping with everything from choosing decorations to crafting invitations. "This is going to blow Linda away," Sarah said one afternoon as they sat surrounded by fabric swatches and catering menus. Emily smiled, though a part of her still worried about whether all this effort would pay off. The first step was picking the venue. Emily wanted somewhere elegant yet comfortable, a place where Linda would feel truly celebrated. After visiting several restaurants and event spaces, she finally settled on a charming Italian bistro that Linda had once mentioned loving. The warm lighting, cozy atmosphere, and delicious food made it the ideal spot. Emily worked closely with the staff to ensure every detail was just right, from the floral centerpieces to the playlist of soft jazz music playing in the background. Next came the guest list, which proved trickier than expected. Emily wanted to include only people who mattered most to Linda, her closest friends, favorite cousins, and a few longtime neighbors. But figuring out who those people were required some detective work. She spent hours chatting with Alex, asking questions about his mother's relationships and memories. "Mom always talks about Aunt Susan," Alex told her one evening, "and I think inviting Mrs. Peterson from next door would mean a lot to her." Slowly but surely, the list came together, each name adding another layer of thoughtfulness to the occasion. Decorations were another area where Emily poured her heart. She chose Linda's favorite flowers, white roses and lavender, and arranged them in delicate bouquets that adorned every table. For an extra personal touch, she framed old photographs of Linda with her loved ones, scattering them around the room like little glimpses into her life. One photo showed Linda holding baby Alex, her face glowing with pride. Another captured her laughing at a family barbecue years ago. Emily hoped these small details would remind Linda how much she was cherished. Food was equally important. Knowing how particular Linda could be, Emily carefully selected dishes that balanced sophistication with familiarity. There were classic Italian favorites like lasagna and tiramisu, alongside lighter options such as grilled salmon and seasonal salads. She even coordinated with the chef to prepare a special dish that Linda adored, mushroom risotto. Every bite, Emily believed, should feel like a hug, a way of saying, "I see you, and I value what makes you happy." As the big day drew closer, Emily found herself growing more excited and more nervous. She confided in Alex one night, admitting that she felt like she was walking a tightrope. "What if she doesn't like it?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with anxiety. "What if none of this matters to her?" Alex reassured her, reminding her of how much effort she'd put into making the evening special. "Mom will see how hard you've worked," he said firmly. "And if she doesn't, that's her problem, not yours." Despite his words, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something might go wrong. Friends noticed her stress and tried to lighten the mood, teasing her about being a perfectionist. "Relax, Em," Sarah joked during one of their final prep sessions. "Even if the cake collapses or the DJ plays the wrong song, everyone will still have fun. It's the thought that counts." Emily laughed, knowing Sarah was probably right. Still, she couldn't help wanting everything to be flawless. In the days leading up to the party, Emily double-checked every detail, triple-confirmed reservations, and rehearsed her speech multiple times. She envisioned Linda walking into the beautifully decorated space, her eyes widening in surprise, her face lighting up with joy. In that moment, Emily hoped all the tension between them would melt away, replaced by understanding and connection. Yet deep down, a tiny flicker of doubt remained, a quiet warning that sometimes, no matter how carefully you plan, life has a way of surprising you. The room was frozen in a stunned silence, the kind that feels heavy and suffocating. No one knew quite what to do or say. Some guests stared at their plates, avoiding eye contact with anyone else, while others exchanged horrified glances. Linda stood there, her arms crossed, as if daring someone to challenge her further. Her expression was calm, almost defiant, but beneath it, there was a flicker of something. Was it satisfaction? Regret? It was impossible to tell. Alex, however, wasn't holding back. His face was red with anger, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. "How could you do this?" he demanded, his voice shaking with emotion. "This was supposed to be a happy night, a celebration for you. Instead, you humiliated Emily in front of everyone she cares about." He took a step closer to his mother, his eyes blazing. "Do you even realize how much effort she put into this? How much she wanted to make you feel special?" Linda didn't flinch. She met his gaze steadily, her tone icy. "I'm not going to pretend everything is fine, just because she threw me a party, Alex," she shot back. "Actions speak louder than words, and so far, I haven't seen anything that convinces me she's ready to be part of this family." Her voice softened slightly, almost apologetic, but still firm. "You're my son. I love you, and I want what's best for you. That's all I've ever done." But Alex wasn't buying it. "What's best for me? Or what's best for you?" he countered, his voice rising. "You've been critical of Emily from day one, and nothing she does seems good enough for you. Did you ever stop to think about how your words might hurt her? About how unfair it is to expect her to live up to some impossible standard?" The argument between mother and son continued, their voices echoing through the now tense atmosphere. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, whispering among themselves. Some tried to intervene, offering weak attempts to mediate the situation. "Maybe we should all take a deep breath," one relative suggested timidly, only to be ignored completely. Others quietly excused themselves, slipping out of the venue without making a scene. Meanwhile, outside, Emily leaned against the cold brick wall of the restaurant, tears streaming down her face. Each sob felt like it carried the weight of months' worth of frustration, disappointment, and heartache. She replayed Linda's words over and over in her mind, dissecting every insult, every jab, wondering if any of it was true. Was she really not good enough? Had she failed to prove herself, despite all her efforts? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Sarah, calling to check on her. Emily hesitated before answering, unsure if she could even form coherent sentences. When she finally picked up, her voice cracked as she whispered, "I don't know what to do. I thought this would fix things. I thought she'd see how hard I've tried." On the other end, Sarah listened patiently, offering comforting words and reminding Emily that none of this was her fault. "You didn't deserve that," Sarah said firmly. "Not tonight. Not ever." Back inside, the tension reached its peak when Alex announced he was leaving to find Emily. Ignoring his mother's protests, he grabbed his coat and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The remaining guests sat in awkward silence, unsure whether to follow him or stay and deal with the fallout. Linda remained where she was, her composure intact, though her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her glass of water. When Alex found Emily outside, she was sitting on a bench, hugging her knees to her chest. Her makeup was smudged, her hair disheveled, but she looked up when she heard his footsteps. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alex knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "None of this is okay. My mom had no right to treat you like that." Emily shook her head, struggling to find the words. I wanted her to like me," she admitted softly. "I wanted us to be a family, to start fresh. But maybe that's not possible." Alex squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We'll figure this out together," he promised. "No matter what happens, I'm on your side. Always." Though his words brought her some comfort, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the road ahead would be far more complicated and painful than she ever imagined. In the days that followed the disastrous party, Emily felt as though she were walking through a fog. The embarrassment still lingered, replaying in her mind like a broken record. She couldn't stop thinking about Linda's cutting remarks and the shocked faces of their friends and family. It was humiliating, but worse than that, it left her questioning everything: her place in Alex's life, her ability to blend into his family, and even her own self-worth. Alex, however, refused to let her spiral into despair. From the moment he found her outside the restaurant, he had been unwavering in his support. He called her every day, sent thoughtful texts, and made sure she knew how much he loved her. "None of this is your fault," he repeated over and over again, his voice firm with conviction. "My mom crossed a line, and I won't stand for it." Despite his reassurances, Emily struggled to shake off the weight of what had happened. One evening, as they sat together on her couch, she finally opened up about her fears. "What if she never accepts me?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "What if this keeps happening, every holiday, every family gathering? I don't know if I can handle that." Alex sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "I can't promise you that my mom will change overnight," he admitted honestly. "But I can promise you that I'll protect you. You're my priority, Em, not her. If she can't respect you, then we'll set boundaries. We'll figure out a way to make things work without letting her control our lives." His words gave Emily a small sense of relief, but the road ahead wasn't easy. Over the next few weeks, Alex had several heated conversations with his mother, demanding an explanation for her behavior. At first, Linda remained defensive, insisting that she was only trying to ensure her son married someone who shared their values. But as Alex pushed back, pointing out the cruelty of her actions, Linda began to soften, just slightly. One afternoon, Alex arranged a meeting between Emily and his mother at a neutral location, a quiet cafe downtown. Both women were hesitant, unsure of what to expect. The air was thick with tension as they sat across from each other, stirring their coffees in silence. Finally, Linda broke the ice. "I suppose I owe you an apology," she said stiffly, avoiding eye contact. Her tone lacked warmth, but there was a flicker of sincerity in her words. Emily blinked, caught off guard. "You don't have to apologize," she replied softly, though her heart raced. "But I do want us to understand each other better. I've always tried my best to be part of your family, to show you that I care about Alex and about being a good partner. That night, it felt like nothing I did mattered to you." Linda hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table. For the first time, she seemed unsure of herself, almost vulnerable. "Maybe I was too hard on you," she admitted reluctantly. "It's not easy for me to see my son grow up and start a new chapter. Sometimes, I think, I worry that I'm losing him." Her admission took Emily by surprise. Beneath Linda's sharp exterior, there was pain, and insecurity rooted in fear of change and loss. In that moment, Emily realized that Linda's hostility wasn't entirely about her. It was also about Linda's struggle to adjust to a shifting dynamic within her own family. "I understand why you'd feel that way," Emily said gently, choosing her words carefully. "And I promise you, Alex loves you just as much as he always has. This isn't about replacing anyone. It's about adding to your family. I hope someday you'll see that." The conversation didn't magically resolve all their issues, but it marked a turning point. Linda didn't suddenly become warm and affectionate, but she did start making an effort to dial back her criticisms. She attended a pre-wedding brunch hosted by Emily, behaving politely, if somewhat reserved, and even complimented the decorations, albeit briefly. For Emily, these small gestures meant more than she could put into words. They weren't perfect, but they showed progress. And that was enough for now. With Alex's unwavering support, she decided to move forward with the wedding, setting clear boundaries with Linda to protect her emotional well-being. It wasn't the fairy tale beginning she'd envisioned, but it was real. And sometimes, reality required compromise, patience, and resilience. As the wedding date approached, Emily reminded herself of one thing: love wasn't about perfection. It was about finding strength in vulnerability, forgiveness in hurt, and hope in uncertainty. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, with Alex by her side.